Hey guys, it's Courtney from Soul Deep Devotions, and I wanted to talk about Abraham today, kind of the earlier parts of Abraham's story. And actually, what's interesting enough is that Genesis 11, where you first see or meet Abraham, is not necessarily where his story ultimately begins. It's not where God first spoke to him. In fact, we don't see that in the book of Genesis. We actually get to read that in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, it says, Stephen said, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from your kindred and go into the land that I will show you.'" So what I really want you to hold on here is what God said to him. God gave him direct orders, and then he gave Abraham a promise. He said to go out from his homeland and go out from his kindred, which means leave your hometown behind, leave your family behind, and go into the land that I will show you. And then God gives him this promise that he is going to make Abraham the father of a ton of nations, that people will be blessed through him, and all of this different stuff. That's the covenant that we know that Abraham received from the Lord. But what's funny is that if we put Acts chapter 7 into context with what we know from Genesis chapter 11, where we first meet Abraham, we'll see that Abraham partially obeys the Lord. It actually takes a couple of chapters before Abraham gets from A to B, before Abraham gets from hearing from the Lord and actually following 100% to the letter what God told him. So if we take a look in the end of Genesis 11, it talks about how Terah, Abraham's father, took Abraham his son and Lot the son of Haran his grandson and Sarai his daughter-in-law, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. And when they came to Haran, which is mentioned in Acts chapter 7, that's how we know that what's spoken about in Acts 7 predates what we're talking about right now, because it says, "But when they came to Haran, they settled there." And in Acts chapter 7, it says, before he lived in Haran. So that's how we kind of know that one precedes the other. So basically, what you can hold on to from that is that Abraham received a promise from the Lord, and he left his homeland, but he did not leave his family behind, because his family, he was still traveling with his father and his nephew. And ultimately, that delays what the Lord is trying to do through him. If he just right away traveled to where the Lord was going to show him, then lots of things that we see in this chapter and the next chapter maybe wouldn't have happened. So Abraham leaves his hometown, but he does not leave his family. And it actually delays him because Abraham stays in the wrong place with the wrong people until his father dies at 205 years. So after his father dies, God speaks again. God retells Abraham the promise that he has for him. It says in the opening verses of chapter 12, it says, "Now the Lord said to Abraham, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all of the families of the earth shall be blessed.'" So God kind of gives Abraham a nudge when his father dies and says, "Hey, this promise is still on the table for you. I'm still going to do it, but you have to go from the country that you've been from, leave your family behind, and go to the place that I am going to show you, and then all of these other things are going to happen. Your name will be great. I will bless you. Nations will come from you. I will curse anybody who curses you. I will bless anybody who blesses you. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you." But you have to do these things. And I know that people say this a lot. It's not a new concept, but partial obedience is still disobedience. Because there's a reason why God gives us things to a letter. There's a reason why God spoke to Abraham from the letter, because it's not Lot's promise, it's not Abraham's father's promise, it's Abraham's promise. So Abraham has to walk in obedience to what the Lord is showing him. So after Abraham's father dies, God re-gives him this promise, and Abraham ends up going out, but he doesn't follow again to the letter because he takes his nephew Lot with him. And yes, he goes out to the land that God ends up showing him and makes an altar and, praises God for the things that he's done, but he doesn't walk in full obedience. And what's even funnier from that is that once he's in the land, a famine hits, and Abraham ends up going to Egypt to escape this famine. To me, I'm like, why doesn't he trust that God's going to take care of him in the land that God gave him? But Abraham's flawed. Abraham's like the rest of us. We trust God where we're comfortable, and where we're not comfortable, we make our own plan. And so to me, when I see that Abraham leaves the land that God gave him to go to Egypt because there's a famine, and all of these other extra things ensue, and all this other trouble falls upon Abraham, possibly it's because Abraham didn't trust God. He didn't follow him to the letter. So after everything that happens in Egypt happens, and you can read about that in Genesis 12, but I unfortunately don't have time to go through it with you right now. Abram leaves Egypt, and that's when he separates with Lot. That's when they go their separate ways. And so now Abraham's walking in full obedience to the Lord. But what I want to show you is that the Lord never rescinds his promise to Abraham just because Abraham is human. He actually makes and reminds and reaffirms his promise to Abraham each step of the way. He never says, oh, Abraham, you've taken too long, and so I pass over you. You're no longer the guy that I'm going to use. Because you know what, guys? God is sovereign in all of his ways. He knows what we're going to do before we even do it. It's all been written. It's not a surprise to him. He knows. So God gave Abraham this promise knowing full well that it was going to take Abraham some time to catch up, to build enough faith to follow God to the letter. And to me, that encourages me, that comforts me, because there are things that God promised me. And you know what? I know that I am flawed enough to probably not have followed him to the letter. To probably say, oh God, I trust you in this area, but let me work on my own in this other area. Let me, I'll struggle, I'll figure it out because I'm gonna put you in a box. And yeah, sometimes I don't believe that God is gonna take me from A to B because I'm human and I don't know how I'm gonna get there. But the thing is that God doesn't have to share all the bullet points of his plan with us. He just has to tell us what we need to know now and what he's going to do because we follow what we need to do now. But I take comfort, I take encouragement in the fact that God made Abraham this amazing promise. And yet Abraham was still flawed. Abraham was still human. And just because Abraham was still human doesn't mean that God pulled everything back and decided to choose somebody else. He didn't pass over Abraham and say, I'm not going to bless you anymore. I'm not going to make nations come out of you. I'm not going to use you anymore because you don't know how to follow me. I'm not saying that our sin is covered because God chose us, or that gives us a free pass for unbelief. No, it doesn't. But God is fully aware that we're all flawed, that we lack faith in certain areas. And so, yeah, sometimes as we're traveling from A to B, our faith needs to be built. Abraham, the father of all faith, still needed his faith to be built. He wasn't a finished work. God didn't give him the covenant or the promise when he was this faith rock star. Abraham obviously still had to work on himself, still obviously had to build faith in God within himself to be stretched and be tested. And Abraham doesn't start off as the man who would sacrifice his son for the Lord. I'm sure if that had happened at the beginning of his walk with God, Abraham would have chose different. But because Abraham is given grace upon grace from God, he's able to get to that point. So what I want to say to you today is, if God give you a promise and you have not seen it come to pass, go back to the original commandment that God gave you. What did God say to you when he gave you that promise? What did God tell you to do? And then ask yourself, have I been following it to the letter? Have I been honoring every part of what God told me to do? And if the answer is no, don't beat yourself up about it. Just repent and get back on track. Don't delay your promise or your, destiny, what God has for you. Don't delay it any further. Just get back on track. That's what God is waiting for you to do today. He has it all written out. He knows what you're going to do before you even do it. But sometimes we need a wake-up call. Sometimes we need a little reminder. And if today is your reminder, then I'm so happy and excited for you to get back on track, because God is waiting to give you a promise. God is waiting to bless you and do what he needs to do through you. So, yeah, don't be discouraged, because even Abraham, even the guy with the biggest faith that you can think of in the Bible, even that guy was flawed. Even that guy partially obeyed. And God didn't pass over him. God didn't find somebody else to do what he wanted to do. He just waited for Abraham to have enough faith to move forward and do what he needed to do. So today, maybe God's doing that for you. Maybe God is just waiting for you to have enough faith to do what he needs to do. He's building your faith today, guys. And that's so exciting. So yeah, that's it for me today. If you want more content, I put out every Tuesday. But you can connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all through the handle Soul Deep Devos, DEVOS. And if you want to get everything straight to your email, you definitely can choose to do so. Just go to the website www.souldeepdevos.com, and just sign up in the subscribe area in the top right hand corner. But that's it from me today, guys. I hope you were blessed by this, and I will see you next week. Bye.